Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on remittances as a gateway to financial resilience. I'm Louis, I'm working for UNCDF, and I'll be your host for today. Before we start the session, I just wanted to share a few logistic notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all the participants and also uploaded on our YouTube channel. This session will last for about 60 minutes. And finally, we have a Q&A section where you can ask questions to the panelists. Please use this one if you have any question and just mark the name of the people you want to respond. Now, I just pass the floor to Julie, my dear colleague, who's going to do the introduction about this webinar and present the panelists.
Thank you, Louis. And welcome, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to our webinar today on remittances as a gateway to financial resilience. We are thrilled to have you all here today, and we're excited to share actionable insights and best practices on inclusive digital remittance solutions and innovative financial services that work for migrants and their families. My name is Julie Kamau, a gender and research analyst at the UNCDF Migration and Remittances team, and I will be your host today, for today's session. And now to begin with the opening remarks. Approximately 4% of the world population live and work outside their countries of origin. Nearly half of them are women. Remittances from these migrants represent a vital source of savings and supplementary income for millions of households in low and middle income countries. Remittances are pivotal for the family's financial inclusion, financial resilience, income generating activities, re-employment, business formation, and the mitigation of risks. Digital remittance channels are faster, more convenient, safer, and cheaper than conventional remittance methods. Despite the rapid digitization and the rise of fintech leading to the shift from cash to digital, we see that digital remittances have been slow to reach those at the last mile, including women, low-income people, and people with low levels of education. We also find that remittance-linked financial services such as savings, insurance, and pensions are seldom easily accessible, especially to women and those using cash channels. These services could be vital in increasing the financial resilience of migrants and their families. For remittances to become a pathway to full economic inclusion and productive use in the host and home countries, at UNCDF, we engage various dominant and emerging remittance service providers and broader financial ecosystem players, focusing on the least developing country corridors to improve the access and usage of digital channels for migrants and their families. At UNCDF, we aim to contribute towards the financial resilience of migrants and their families by facilitating the design and the development of gender-smart and migrant-centric digital remittances, which can, of course, be easily linked to other financial services such as savings, digital wages, insurance, and pension, which can be delivered through the alignment of financial ecosystem players. In today's session, we will address how various stakeholders, including financial institutions, development and research partners, can drive innovations to improve the financial resilience of migrants and their families. Throughout the session, we encourage you to share your questions and comments in the chat. We will address your questions during the Q&A segment. But before we dive in, please join me in welcoming all our speakers today. First up, we have Maroop Hussain. Maroop is an impact assessment and analyst specialist at the UNCDF Migration and Remittances team. He will share insights from the demand-side research conducted by the UNCDF Migration and Remittances team in partnership with the Heath Tropical Institute. For the panel discussions, I am pleased to be joined by MD Sabir Hussain. Mr. Sabir is the Deputy Managing Director and the Chief Operating Officer of the BRAC Bank Limited. Mr. Sabir leads the operations, technology, and the general service functions of the bank. We also have Ariana Zapanta. Ariana is a research manager for innovation poverty action in the Financial Inclusion Program. Ariana is currently managing the research study in Bangladesh that evaluates the impact of goal setting for remittance senders and recipients related to their financial behaviors, particularly on the levels of savings. And finally, we have Mr. Rajashi Dutta Barua. Mr. Rajashi is the senior manager in MSC's inclusive finance and banking domain. He leads the practice on insurance, banking, and enterprise development there. Now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Marup, my colleague, to share the insights from the demand side research. Over to you, Marup.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. In my presentation, I will talk about financial resilience of remittance customer, both remittance sender and remittance recipient. Goal of my presentation is to showcase different uses of remittances. At the same time, also the use of different financial services that remittance customer uses. And we will also try to distinguish what type of financial service cash-based remittance customer use and what type of financial services digital remittance customer they use on that. And finally, we will also try to factor what are the factors that determine who use cash remittances and who use digital remittances. And in this presentation, all the insights are coming from the demand side research that at the UNCDF we did recently. The main purpose of this demand side research is to minimize the gap between data and insight. And this is important because this gap often hinders the ability of remittance service provider, regulator, and financial policymakers to reach out the last mile customer, women, customer in the rural area, customer with less education on that. So with this pursuit, the demand side research, it combined different surveys as well as validation and created insight for policymakers on that. So far in this research, we harmonized data of 10 remittance service provider. We analyzed about 80 million remittance transaction data of the customer of our remittance service partners. We conducted about 3,000 surveys plus about 1,000 customer interviews. And we did not stop there just doing the surveys and bringing the result. Rather, we took this result and we validated this result in validation workshop with our partners. And from these validated insight, we published article series. Those are useful for different stakeholders for different type of targeting and in migrant-centric and gender-smart remittance innovation on that. So talking about this demand of this, in this collaboration, this was truly a global collaboration. Our partners was Kit, Butterfly, and Aflatun. They collaborated with us at different stages of this research. And the 3,000 interviews surveys that we did, they are active customer of our remittance service partners from different parts of this world. And our customers, about 3/4 of them are remittance recipient, and they are customer of Bragg Bank in Bangladesh, or IME Pay in Nepal, Wizall Money in Senegal, and Lion Bank in Ethiopia. Rest of the 1/4 of the respondent are remittance sender, and they are customer of RAG Bank in UAE and Senpi from South Korea. We also interviewed customers from Lucy in Singapore. Roughly, the respondent are gender balanced. We have about 50% women remittance customer and 50% man remittance customer. With that, let's move to the first insight. We ask the respondent, what is the purpose of remittance they receive or they send? And in fact, this is one of the main purpose that someone migrate to other countries is with the higher income potential, and they hope that they will send back this money to the origin country, to their family, to give them a better life. So the result shows not surprisingly, consumption is the main purpose of remittance. About 80% of the respondents, they mentioned that they use remittance for consumption purposes. But we also see other use cases of remittance. They use remittance for education, for healthcare, for investment, even for payment of utility and energy bills. So there is not only consumption, but there are, although lower extent, but there are other use cases of remittances. Notice that there is a clear gender dimension in terms of who use remittance for what purposes. We noticed that women, they report that they use remittance for education, for healthcare, and for utility bill payment, which is different than men remittance customer. They said that they use remittances for more for productive investment or financial investment case. So there is these two things. One is there are many use cases of remittances, but at the same time, there is a gender dimension of different use of remittances. The next one is we look at what type of financial service the remittance customer they use. And we are calling these financial services as resilience building financial service, because these financial services has the ability to enable the remittance customer to cope up with different emergencies. For example, if there is a unforeseen asset loss or income loss or death of someone, remittance can enable this customer to cope up with those emergencies of that. So here we see that about 50 to 60% of the remittance customer, they say they use savings account. 40 to 50% mentioned that they use mobile wallet. There are other services, for example, insurance, current bank account, or they have also access to bank loan or microfinance loan. So one thing is this number is much higher if we compare the national averages. That is, the remittance customer, they have better access to different financial services compared to the typical person from a country. So this probably one insight is that remittance has this potential to improve financial inclusion in different countries. Notice that, like in the previous slide, there is again a gender dimension. Men are more likely to use different type of financial services, savings account, mobile wallet. In all the cases, men has the advantage in terms of using different financial services compared to the women there. So so far, we are showing that there are many use cases. At the same time, there are also gender dimension. But one question is it same for all the remittance customer? We know within remittance customer, there are two groups. One are who receive remittance in digital platform, for example, in bank account or in mobile wallet, versus another group of remittance customer, they receive remittance on cash platform. So we have this digital customer versus cash customer. And here we are showing that the use of different financial services by digital customer versus cash customer. And clearly we see that digital customer, they have better access, they use more these financial services, they have better access and use of savings account, mobile wallet, current account. In all the cases, they have advantage over cash customers on that. So the next question can be, does that matter? Some people receive remittances through digital platform, and some people receive remittances in cash platform. It is what they prefer, but it might not be the case. So to check that, we ask our respondent if they can come up with an emergency fund in case if there is a need, in case if there is an emergency, can they come up with some money after covering their regular expenses? And as you can see that 80% of the digital customers, they mentioned that they have the capacity to come up with some money to cope up with any emergencies. And this is about 75% for the cash-based customer. So this is, we are calling that the cash digital customer, they have better resilience to weather a financial emergency if needed. But if we also think about overall financial health, so financial health is not only resilience, it also includes financial control, financial security, financial freedom. If we take all four components into together, we call it financial health, and our data shows that the result shows digital customer, they have better financial health compared to the cash customer. So overall, we see that the digital remittance, it has the better capacity to help our remittance customer to cope up with as resilience, also to build a better financial health on that. So finally, one question is, okay, so we see that remittance is better. It enables customer to different financial services. And within remittance, we see that digital remittance is better compared to the cash remittances. So the question can be like, okay, so who are the digital customer and who are the cash customer? So on this slide, we are presenting two customer archetype here. On the left-hand side, we are presenting Salma. Salma, she is a cash remittance customer of Bragg Bank, and she is representing the cash customer. Whereas on the right side, we have Muhammad. He receives remittance through a bank account, again with Bragg Bank. So he is representing the digital customer, digital remittance customer. Now, Salma is representing the cash customer because we saw that in the data of all the cash customer in Bragg Bank, 60% of them are women. Whereas of all the bank remittance recipient, 65% of them are men. So clearly, women, they are more likely to use cash remittances versus men. And this same holds for mobile wallet and another form of digital remittances. We also find that the customer with low education or only primary education, they are more likely to be cash customer. And customer with higher education, they are more likely to be a digital customer. At the same time, we also found that the customer coming from the low income household, they are more likely to use cash remittances on that. So clearly it's the women, is the customer with low education, is the customer who are coming from the low income families. They are the cash based customer, and as opposed to the digital customers on that. So overall, we see that the digital remittance, it has the potential to work as an on-ramp to enable individual and household to improve their financial resilience through accessing different type of financial services. At the same time, this digital remittance, it can enable other type of services, for example, savings and insurance, and that can help our customer to build their financial resilience to get ready to cope up with any unforeseen emergencies on that part. But from the very beginning, we first need to make sure that the digital remittance, it is accessible to different kind of customer, especially to the last mile customer, women, lower educated customer, or customer from the rural area who are lagging behind to cut into digital platforms. And this is not because digital remittances is faster, cheaper, or safer. It's because this will help them to go one step further, to help them to build their future, a better financial resilient future on that. So I will stop there and I will hand it over to Julie. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maroop, for such a comprehensive presentation, but also magnifying the plight of marginalized group, including women and people with low levels of income and low levels of education, and the value of digital remittances, that they're not only cheaper, faster, safer, but they are also a gateway for developing the financial resilience of migrants and their families. And now we're going to build on these points or these insights in our panel discussion. So I'm going to open up the floor for the panel discussion with the first question to you, Mr. Sabir. Now, we've seen from the data analytics that the percentage of women customers using Bragg Bank's digital wallet increased from 37% in 2019 to 45% in 2020 and remained high in 2022. Please, could you tell us, Mr. Sabir, what steps did Bank take to ensure greater adoption and usage of its mobile wallet and bank accounts among remittance recipients, particularly women and those living in rural areas? Over to you, Mr. Sabir.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, as you know, financial inclusion is one of our key objectives. I would say it's in our DNA, not only because we are under the umbrella of BRAC, but also we are a member of founding member of GABV, Global Alliance for Banking on Values. Now, as far as financial inclusion is concerned, we do few things distinctly in Bangladesh. SME, particularly focus on CMSME is one, agent banking is the other, and focus on the remittance business. To take the remittance business or remittance agenda forward, I can mention few key points like we are partnering with new age digital and wallet-based exchange houses, very recent being Tap, and that's being a great success. We are present in countries like South Korea, UAE, and Oman, where our full-time employee financial counselors are actually getting in touch firsthand with the migrants. Then again, we are opening accounts of migrants prior to migration, and that's from the recruiting agencies and technical training centers. And nowadays, female population are also, we see growing in number in terms of the migrants. So we tap into those opportunities even before they migrate. A recent experience is with nurse migrations. We have actually succeeded in opening accounts for all of them before they migrated. There are various numerous promotional campaigns and all. So, and there are continuous effort on literacy, Uthan Boitok we call it, homestead frontier meetings in the villages, where I can assume there would be many female participants. So that's what. But I can say that we still have a long way to go, and our efforts will continue.
Really, really great, interesting points, especially on touching on the meeting the recipients or the migrants or the migration journey. That is very crucial. And also how you're partnering with ecosystem players to ensure that you reach migrants, but also the fact that you're reaching migrants where they are in the countries where they're working. You mentioned South Korea. And actually that is a very interesting segue that leads us to the next question for Ariana. So we see that remittances account for some of the largest flows of international money into low and middle income countries. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, formal remittance inflows in Bangladesh totaled $22 billion. And estimates suggest that informal remittances were just as high. Of this, 60% were received by women who largely reside in rural areas. Ariana, from your experience, what are some of the most striking examples of inclusive and innovative approaches that are being tested or implemented to facilitate the digital financial inclusion of remittance customers and on the sending and on the receiving side? Over to you, Ariana.
Thanks, Julie. For me, I think the most striking example of an innovative approach that facilitates digital financial inclusion is the use of mobile money, which has had very compelling evidence about its direct impacts on important outcomes such as consumption, risk sharing, and poverty. Mobile money has enabled the transfer of funds across large geographic distances without the need of owning a bank account, which is a huge thing when you think about financial inclusion because of the ease by which mobile money services like sending and receiving of money can be easily accessed by ordinary folks with just their mobile phone. So what does the evidence exactly say about mobile money? In Kenya, a study that looked at the rapid expansion of M-Pesa, which allowed the transfer of money to rural areas, found that mobile money users had their consumption unchanged following a negative shock, whereas non-users saw an average drop of about 7 to 10% in consumption. In a follow-up study studying the long-term impacts, the same authors estimated that mobile money helped reduce poverty by 2 percentage points, which may seem little, but it's actually non-trivial at all, as it's equivalent to about 200,000 households being lifted out of extreme poverty. Many studies from other countries, such as Bangladesh, Uganda, and Mozambique, which I wouldn't detail anymore, found similar positive impacts on consumption and poverty. This illustrates how removing transaction costs and other barriers in the domestic setting can make an impact on poverty. The reason why I say this is because the topic of remittances, including international remittances, cannot be entirely divorced from the topic of mobile money or digital financial services. The positive impacts on poverty that we saw for mobile money tell us that we can achieve the same results for remittances if we are to remove the barriers faced by customers. What are some examples of these barriers, right? This can be the constraints that women face in owning a mobile money wallet and the overall trust in the system, which Maroop has slightly attributed to in his presentation when it showed that women comprise 60% of cash customers. The second one is on digital illiteracy, which is more prevalent, as we know, in rural areas and prevents people from immersing and maximizing services, which now expands to, say, digital credit and financial investments, etc. And lastly, something that an issue that IPA is very much studying on is the high and opaque cost, which is also a serious issue. IPA's consumer protection surveys found that more than 30% of digital finance consumers report agent overcharging in Nigeria and Uganda. So it's not just about the high costs alone, but how customers are being misled on what the actual fees are, particularly affecting the uneducated and the illiterate folks. All that to say that the evidence suggests that the service has to be fast, easy, and safe enough so more remittance customers can benefit from these services. If we are to address these barriers that prevent people from using these services, we can potentially realize greater gains in poverty reduction.
Really well said, Ariana. Thank you for such a meticulous response, wrapping up the value of mostly. I like how you link the mobile money together with remittances, that you cannot do without those, but also you clearly highlight the barriers that need to be removed by the ecosystem players, be it the private sector or the public sector, regarding enforcing digital literacy for migrants and their families, especially for women, but also clearly highlighting the value of reducing the transaction costs, but also providing transparency and clear information to the customers to eventually empower them. Really well said. And that actually leads us to the next question for you, Mr. Rajashi. We've seen that MSC has conducted market readiness assessments in 6 countries in the UAE, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Nepal, and Sri Lanka to gauge the viability of insurance sector initiatives that can support migrant social protection efforts. So Mr. Rajashi, tell us, based on the assessment, what are the gaps or the opportunities that exist for migrants and remittance recipients in terms of insurance and pension services that could contribute to their financial resilience? Over to you, Mr. Rajashi.
Thank you, Julie. So, in terms of gaps, let me touch upon the critical ones that we have identified so far. First, the developing countries, these are typically the origin or the home countries, as we call them. They have very low levels of insurance penetration, and they also lack, migrant-focused pension products. And migrants are, in a way, systemically excluded from the public benefits or, old age pensions and access to healthcare facilities in the destination countries. For the irregular migrants, which do form a significant, proportion also, the problem is more acute. The second gap that is very critical is about women migrants. Women migrants constitute, 49% of the total migrant population from Southeast Asia. Women migrants face the same risks as their male counterparts, with additional conditions that place them in a more vulnerable position, as they're mostly employed in the unorganized sector, If I take the case of Bangladesh, for instance, a significant proportion of women who migrate outside, they do not have any formal education. There is a big gap of formal education between the male migrant segment and the woman migrant segment, and so and these women migrants, they are mostly employed in the informal sector or as housemaids, so they are more at risk of exploitation and exclusion. If I have to talk about opportunities, given the higher risk that migrants usually face, they would greatly benefit from insurance that targets their specific needs. So tailored gender-smart insurance and pension-based solutions that can expand financial health and strengthen their resilience, not only the migrants' resilience, but more importantly, the resilience of their families back home, to shocks and setbacks. That's very critical for them. The second opportunity that I'd like to highlight is, the importance of contribution-based universal pension schemes are very vital especially once they return from their from the host countries. And third, the need to leverage transaction level data on remittance flows in typically the low and middle income countries to improve the functioning of the remittance market itself. So these transaction level data can be of vital use to develop new products and to also make underwriting models that can help extend these new products to these migrant segments. Over to you, Julie.
Excellently said, Rajashi. Thank you so much on highlighting very clearly the opportunities and the barriers that are involved in developing migrant-centric and gender-smart pensions and insurances. I think what really captivated me was when you mentioned the precarious lives of migrants, and especially mentioning that migrant men face this, but it is especially intense for women. And also you highlighted the importance of having financial literacy. And also on the opportunities, you talked about having the value of having contribution-based pension schemes in the home countries when the migrants return. So clearly tying up the point, as Ariana was mentioning, and also Sabir was mentioning, on linking this whole migration journey to the remittance journey, and of course, magnifying that with sound, good analytics and data. Now we're going to move on to the second round of questions. And as we saw earlier in Marup's presentation, we see that saving accounts are the most widely used among migrants and remittance recipients using digital channels, followed by insurance, loans, credit cards, and pension. As highlighted in the previous responses, BRAC Bank is piloting different remittance-linked financial services to diversify the use case of remittances, such as education, healthcare, energy, and saving. Mr. Sabir, I turn to you, and I would love you to share with us what are some of the successes and challenges BRAC Bank has encountered in piloting remittance-linked financial services in Bangladesh. Over to you, Mr. Sabir.
Thank you, Julie. Truly so. It's basically the savings account which we actually penetrated the most. Now, as far as the savings account is concerned, it has a couple of other, I would say, important aspects. One is this debit card, another is the digital or mobile app. Without presence of these two, the stickiness generally dies down. So going forward, we are trying to try digital app and the debit card as much as possible. Even in places where the small charges come as a barrier, we'll waive those charges and see if they use it. We are focusing on debit card because that's the means with which they will be able to do cashless transaction. And the mobile app will keep them abreast as to what is in their account and then about the transaction details and everything. Then again, not everybody has a smartphone. So that is one limitation we'll have to bear in mind. Over the years, what we've seen, we had about 25% of the incoming remittances coming into accounts. Now that with numerous drives, we can see about 75% now comes through the accounts, I mean, other than cash. Digital wallets, I mean, Bikash plays a significant role. We have a good partnership and understanding with them. As you know, Bikash is part of us. As far as absolute numbers are concerned, in 2022, it was about 22 billion taka, which came through other than cash means. The same number was about 6 or 7 in 2019. So we can see the journey. So that's one. Insurance, we are a little far away because the regulator is still working on it. We are keeping close tab on that space, but as and when it comes up, we will surely move on. Loans are not that easy in this segment due to some regulatory restrictions. At the same time, many of these remittance recipients, they do not have proper national ID card numbers or national IDs. They don't have formal jobs. So as far as while even opening an account is concerned, if you ask for income proof document, they can't show much. And that's very much an essential document when you issue a loan to somebody, because you need to have a guarantee that he or she will be able to pay you back, and definitely a source of that income is necessary. So these are few challenges, but I'm sure we will be innovating and finding ways to penetrate further. As far as SMEs are concerned, or small traders, you can see in the remote districts, we are offering a new method of calculating their income. We are considering these remittances as part of their income and offering them loans if that supports their income. I've tapped into the data very recently. It's growing, but not flying very high, as you can see. That's about it.
Really well put, Mr. Sabir. I like as well how you highlight the pain points that remittance recipients face, be it on the low IDs, be it also on the lack of income, especially when it comes to access to this suite of financial services. But you also mentioned an important point on how on the stickiness of financial services and what BRAC Bank is doing to ensure that you provide services not only for a specific segment of customers. You are understanding that the market or the customers are segmented. Therefore, you're offering both cash-based channels, both digital-based channels, but also bank accounts. And also you touched upon the element of savings. And I'm going to hand it over to Ariana, because I have a really nice question for her. Ariana, in practice, we see that there is often a disconnect between migrants' and recipients' preference on how remittances should be used. Migrants prefer remittances to be saved, and recipients' households prefer immediate consumption. Thus, there can be a disconnect between migrants and recipients in terms of the productive use of remittances. Considering the ongoing work with IPA, UNCDF, and BRAC Bank, what strategies are being tested to encourage joint commitment among migrants and remittance recipients, especially when it comes to savings? Over to you, Ariana.
Thank you, Julie. So the disconnect that you mentioned is quite well known as, in fact, the motivation of many commitment studies thus far. I want to spend some time discussing first some interventions that have been tested on remittance savings, which can be primarily divided into two categories, the soft and hard commitments, with the latter involving stricter or more severe restrictions on where the money is supposed to go. Studies have tested both, and overall, the evidence suggests that soft commitments generate more positive outcomes, such as increased savings, versus hard commitments. A study from Dean Yang targeting Filipino migrants in Rome explored the impacts of an introduction of a soft commitment, that is, the labeling of remittances as being for education, versus a hard commitment of having funds directly paid to the school, with the student's educational performance being monitored. As context, investment and education are common use of remittances, as we also saw in some other studies, especially for Filipino households. They found that the introduction of simple labeling increased remittances by more than 15%, while adding the ability to directly fund the school only adds 2%. That's a 13 percentage point difference. A more recent 2022 study of Filipino workers in the UAE found that labeling of remittances, with this time the migrants' intended use, which can be for education, business investment, or something else, leads migrants with low levels of baseline remittances to increase their levels. There was no effect, however, of the labeling for migrants with already high remittances. Other studies covering Uganda and Morocco that tested the soft commitment of labeling funds for a direct purpose also showed positive impacts. These illustrate how setting a goal for a particular fund can help incentivize or serve as a good nudge for increased level of remittances and savings. Now, we take this even a step further in our ongoing study with Dean Yang and Alexander Fertig and Brack and UNCDF by testing a goal-setting intervention in Bangladesh, in which remittance recipients and centers communicate their savings goals with each other and potentially discuss a joint goal. Participants will be randomly divided into treatment and control groups, whereby the treatment group will receive the complete goal-setting intervention. That is that each remittance recipient center pair will know the counterpart's goals with nudges all throughout the monitoring period. What's different from the early interventions that I mentioned and labeling is that this gives the remittance recipients an extent of influence on the savings goals, right? Which is something that's super interesting for us and can have important implications on remittance savings in general. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Ariana. Again, really, really great response. Also linking up the value of having good research. I mean, you mentioned about, you highlight about the RCT study that is ongoing in Bangladesh, but you also give us evidence of what has worked in Philippines, but also among migrants in the UAE using the soft and the hard commitments, and especially mentioning this word nudge and labeling to help migrants identify how they can set up the remittances for some intended purpose. I really appreciate your response, and we also are looking forward to the results of this study, and hopefully we can share this as well in this platform. And now to the final question to you, Mr. Rajashi. It would be great if you could share your experience in terms of the MSc assessments that have been done in the 6 countries. I would love if you would share with us what are the key building blocks of a viable migrant financial resilience market system, and how can we ensure that that kind of a system delivers gender smart and migrant-centric insurance and pensions. And also, if you can expound, please tell us what the differences are in terms of the home country and the host countries. Over to you, Rajashi.
Sure. So, based on the studies that we have done so far, the delivery of solutions that are both migrant-centric and gender responsive, we need support at 3 levels. The first is ecosystem level, then institutional level, and then at the product level. So if I were to dive a little deeper into each of these 3, at ecosystem level, we need conducive regulatory environment regarding insurance and pension operations, especially cross-border operations. The regulations need to incentivize innovation in insurance and pension, and that has to happen, through a well-developed social security and financial inclusion policy of the country itself. And it should clarify the role of the players in detail. At the institution level, research and learning-backed product and business case especially for gender-centric solutions need to be done by leveraging the digital ecosystem and developing sustainable partnerships that foster migrant insurance. Lastly, at the product level, the need of the hour is for user-friendly product design. So in a lot of cases, we do see that products are there, but the uptake is not as much, is it? So user-friendly product design is important. So is pricing and delivery channel of insurance and pension products. And these need to be backed by financial literacy initiatives. So these building blocks, the three layers that we have identified, an ideal market system will be able to deliver insurance and pension solutions through digital channels and processes that are easy to deploy. So there has to be scalability in the design of products and delivery processes that are there. The market will utilize the potential of other financial products like savings, credit, and remittances, where insurance and pension can be bundled as cross-sell products, and that can bring disruptive changes in the way access to affordable remittances and financial services is being delivered to migrants. And this can bring great leverage, as we have seen mostly with the microfinance industry that has helped, that has played a crucial role in kind of delivering insurance specifically to the lower income segment. Some of the identified key actors are, of course, the central banks, insurance and pension regulators, the ministries of finance, foreign affairs, labor, the Ministry of Information Technology to a great extent in the current scenario, national data centers, insurance and pension providers and distributors, and again, DFS providers like remittance service providers and mobile money operators and all. So, these building blocks will require the support of actors across the value chain, from the ecosystem level to the product level, and to innovate the design, development, and implementation of the migrant-centered and gender-responsive products. So broadly, the building blocks would remain the same for host and origin countries. However, the roles and actions would vary, as per the local needs and situations. So for example, if I were to put an example, a UAE-based player can bundle insurance at the senders as well as the receivers end. However, the level of digitization and awareness about the product will change as per the needs of the target beneficiary. So accidental or life insurance product may be more beneficial in UAE, as health insurance is already taken care of, whereas out-of-pocket health insurance will be a great need for say a migrant whose family resides in Nepal. So these are the, I think, the building blocks that are necessary to create an environment such as that.
Again, thank you so much, Mr. Rajashi, for such a wholesome response. And I like how you pointed out that you make it simple, that we need these three key building blocks to ensure the delivery of gender-smart and migrant-centric insurances and pensions. You clearly highlight the value of the ecosystem having laws, regulations, and incentives that are directed towards the insurance and pension landscape, and clarifying the role of the players. That is essentially vital. And you also talk about at the institutional level, having partnerships across the financial ecosystem players to ensure that these services are offered to the migrants and their families in host and home country. Again, you also highlight the value of having products, and not just products, but user-friendly products that in their design and their development incorporate the needs and pain points of migrants and their families. Really well put, and I also appreciate that this line of thinking is also the line of thinking of the UNCDF. And in the interest of time, I think we're going to move on to the Q&A session. And we have very lovely questions from you, the audience, and I'm just going to read them out and target them to whoever is designated to. And I'm going to start off with a question directed to you, Rajashi. Could you give us examples of how micropensions and digital financial inclusion initiatives are integrated and implemented? And if yes, are these privately initiated, government-led, or structured as a PPP? Over to you, Rajashi.
Sure. I think one of the greatest examples is combined from, if I could go the example of India and Bangladesh both. So these two countries are the thriving and the oldest markets for microfinance. So cumulatively, I think in India there is a population of somewhere close to 15 million, and Bangladesh, I'm sure somewhere close to 7 million would be the microfinance customer base. And the microfinance network itself has become a very effective channel for delivery of micro insurance. So though most of it is credit linked insurance, but I think the kind of comfort and the resilience that they provide to the end customer is actually phenomenal. Consider the case that these are people who had not yet understood the concept of insurance in the first place, and still consider insurance more as a cost, a non-essential cost, rather than something that they would want to buy voluntarily. But the bundling of insurance and the design of the product that has become affordable because of the scale of the insured base, that has resulted in coverage of a very needy segment under the insurance product. So I think that is one of the greatest examples that we can really draw inspiration from.
Really well said. And I have a question for Mr. Sabir. Mr. Sabir, please could you tell us what investments BRAC Bank has made in terms of financial literacy? Because we talk about financial literacy, and we also have seen in Marup's presentation the value of pushing for digital remittance services, especially to low-income households and to people with low levels of education. So please could you tell us what are the financial literacy initiatives and skill trainings for remittance customers that BRAC is offering? Have you seen a return in investment? Over to you, Mr. Sabir.
Yeah, thank you very much. At the very beginning, mentioned that in places like Korea, Qatar, Oman, we deploy our full-time employees and we see benefits. So we are actually increasing those number of consultants in various places, and that's happening. Other than that, the agent banking channel and the SME presence in remote corners of Bangladesh, we use these channels heavily for in-person meetings. In fact, during the COVID period, we couldn't do in-person as much. We did online trainings wherever it was possible. But as far as female populations are concerned, we take extra care, and we have actually programs for them separately. But as you know, numbers, all we see is the conversion from cash to either account or mobile wallet. That's the only indicator I have, other than the fact that it's growing. So in the last 2 months, I can mention the numbers have really doubled, and we have renewed focus on that. So that's what. And in fact, other than that, we are investing on technology heavily. So as far as remittance inflow is concerned, so that it doesn't get any hindrance, it doesn't get any bottleneck, so that the flow is instant, not only within the bank, but outside the bank. So if the remittance comes through us and goes to another bank, irrespective of whoever it gets to, we ensure that it gets instantly as much as possible.
Thank you, Sabir, for candidly answering that question. I have a question for you, Ariana. And in the first round, you talked about some of the challenges that remittance customers face. And this question is a little bit more clearer, that if you could expound a little bit, what are the frustrations that remittance customers have with the current methods of cross-border remittances?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Julie, for that question. So in terms of the concerns that remittance recipients have in the services like currently being provided, there's like a couple of things there, a couple of barriers that we in the study are also trying to address and trying to consider in the iteration of our design, right? So the first is the overall trust in the digital financial system. So despite the headways that we see in mobile money adoption or in the savings adoption, there's still some distrust in the mobile money system or the banking system in general, especially in rural areas where the bank population mostly resides. So these are concerns on whether the funds, for example, when deposited, will be manipulated, and incidents of overcharging and additional fees, as I mentioned earlier. So that's why in our design for our research, we would set up a short orientation at the start of our in-person activities that introduces participants on the savings account so that their preconceived notions and issues on savings account can be clarified. And the second one is removing like the communication barriers and logistical barriers about having joint communication or commitment on remittances. So this also connects to what you were mentioning earlier about the disconnect between the goals of remittance recipients and senders. So the intervention in the study seeks to address this itself by providing a platform by which both parties can share their goals and discuss with the help of an externally trained representative. And as I said earlier, nudges are also planned all throughout the intervention period. So these are just some of the examples of concerns that, of course, remittances customers face. And there's more that, like I wouldn't detail anymore, but these are some of the big concerns that we also face in our study that we're currently doing.
Thank you so much, Ariana. Really great response. And I have a question for you, Maru. You led us through this. You managed to narrow down a whole research project of an AI in a couple of presentations. And there's a question targeted to you that asks if you can tell us what are the characteristics of men and women responding to the survey? Are they similar or controlled? For example, in terms of their nationalities, education levels, marital status, the number of children, dependents, several characteristics. Please, could you briefly,
Sure.
given the short time
Thank you
limit,
very much.
answer this question? Yeah.
Thank you. I will also go through just quickly a few things. So the respondent in our survey are representative of our remittance service partners. They are not representative of national customers on that. What we try to do is we try to balance our sample by gender, by education, by the platform they are using. So the customers are representative at that level, but not at the national level on that. There was one, Julie, if you allow me in a minute, there was one question that about the credit card. Those are mostly from the remittance sender from UAE and South Korea. They are the most user of the credit card of that, not on the recipient side from Bangladesh and Nepal. There was one question about what are the factors that drive who use cash versus digital. As we mentioned, it's about gender, it's about education, income. Those are the few factors that defined on that. There was one question about interesting question. Is it women, they're using less digital platform because they receive cash income? This is quite interesting and UNCDF is working on that. We saw that one of the main reason a lot of people using digital because they receive their income through in their bank account by the company who give them the job. So that also enable them to adopt this digital platform, which is less likely for women who are probably working as in different household activities in UAE or in other countries on that. But we are almost finalizing a synthesis report for based on all these data we have, and we are in the last phases, and we will share the complete synthesis report based on all these interviews and insight very soon with all of you. Thank you. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to quickly wrap it up because we're over the hour. So today we've covered a lot of ground, from the mind-opening demand-side research insights shared by Maru to the thought-provoking panel discussions from Sabir, Ariana, and Rajashi. Thank you so much. And of course, the remarkable questions from you, the audience. But you'll ask me, Julie, what are the key takeaways? From this discussion, the key takeaway one for me is that digital remittances can benefit marginalized groups, especially women migrants, compared to cash-based models. They are faster, cheaper, and safer. My second takeaway is that migrants and their families will switch to formal channels if we earn their trust and make it worth their while. Digital remittances can be linked to other financial services such as savings, insurance, and pensions, which can give migrants and their families the means to withstand shocks and setbacks. And my final takeaway, gender smart and migrant-centric digital remittances will not happen automatically. It requires new ways of thinking, public and private sector collaboration, data and research, and inclusive product design with users and not just for users. Ladies and gentlemen, UNCDF is very grateful for your active participation. We hope that this webinar sparked your interest in financial resilience of migrants and their families through digital remittances and related services. We would like to extend a special thanks to the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation and the Sweden International Development Agency for their support, to the UNCDF's Migrant Money Program, to our eminent panelists. Thank you so much for your contributions. We are really, really grateful for your time and effort in making this discussion a success. And also to the audience for your kind presence and the quality of questions. We tried as much as possible to respond to them, and for those we couldn't, we will reach out to you via email. We will share the recording of this session and the materials with all the participants in the coming days. Again, thank you so much and have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
you.